She won't dare to sing. She actually came? Shameless. Selena Carter, 35 years old, stepped onto the wedding stage of the man who once discarded her like an old item. No applause, no smiles, only blank stares. A mix of pity, mockery, and the anticipation of her collapse. She stood tall, mic in hand, a golden dress gently swaying with her heartbeat. The spotlight hit her eyes, but she didn't blink. "I'm going to sing a song I wrote, not for any of you, but for the one who was buried alive in her own silence." She began to sing, and when the first note came out, spoons stopped clinking, eyes lifted, breath held. The whole hall, as grand as a royal engagement, fell into utter silence. Before the silence, Selena Carter had been the most resounding voice in southern New Orleans. Not your average karaoke voice, but the kind that made proud old men remove their glasses, made strangers cry. Just from a single, wordless jazz phrase. They called her the black light in the white mist, a miracle from the crumbling steps of the Ninth Ward. At 21, she was invited to perform in New York. At 23, an indie label wanted to record her live on a wind-blown rooftop. But she said no, because of love, because of a man with a wide smile, soft words, and a heart cold as carbon paper. She thought she was choosing love. No one warned Selena that when a woman gives up her voice for love, it's the beginning of her disappearance. What's worse is she did it willingly. What makes a voice like hers choose silence? Selena grew up in a ramshackle wooden house, where the ceiling leaked every rainy season and train whistles became lullabies. Her mother, Louise Carter, was a seamstress who couldn't read sheet music but knew every old hymn by heart. Every Sunday, she'd walk Selena across 4 blocks to church. Not to pray, but to hear her daughter sing. And after every song, she'd lean in and whisper, "Your voice is God's gift. No one has the right to take it, not even someone you love to madness." But when Selena met Eric Donovan, she forgot those words. Because for the first time, a white man told her, "You sing like you turn the world into a home." And she believed him. Believed this love would preserve her voice, not crush it. She didn't know that the wrong kind of love doesn't always kill you with a blade, but with sweet praise poured like honey. That was when the first crack formed, but no one noticed, not even her. Only her mother, gone since Selena was 25, still echoed in her mind. "Don't let them take it, Sel. Don't let them take you." How could she know that the them was the very man she called love? They met on a sweltering summer night. She was behind an old piano at Mosaic on Bourbon Street, purple neon lighting her cheek. Eric Donovan walked in like the entire noisy room suddenly held its breath, waiting for something unusual. He didn't smile wide. He stood at the back, hands in pockets, eyes cold, like someone who's read too many law books and too little poetry. But when she reached the final note of Baltimore and the sound faded into air, he clapped first. Not hurried, not showy, just 3 claps, slow, steady, dangerous. As he approached, his voice was low and assured. "You shouldn't be performing in places like this. You were born to make the world go silent." In that moment, Selena didn't hear warnings. She only heard the sweet offer, to be seen, to be lifted, to be held. 1 week later, they were a couple. A month later, she turned down the New York performance, just to stay with a man who had never heard the word no. Selena didn't know that the price of being seen can be a cage made from someone else's gaze. She had no idea the man who made her heart race would one day squeeze the life from the music that was once her soul. She didn't know, but that night it began, and no one, not even Selena, could have guessed that love would lead her to the edge of silence. In the beginning, Eric seemed programmed to be the perfect man. He listened to her sing as if each note were a commandment. He asked about lyrics she wrote at 19, listening with eyes that made Selena feel, "Finally, someone understands me without trying to fix me." They rummaged through dusty vinyl shops together, debated Nina Simone and Sarah Vaughan like old friends. Once he said, "You don't need to sing to be loved. But when you sing, you make me believe in love." Selena naively believed, true love is where you get to be yourself. But have you ever thought, sometimes the ones who love us most are the ones who slowly change our voice without us noticing? Bit by bit, glance by glance, gentle suggestions. You begin to pull back, like a singer who lowers her volume when she's on the wrong stage. Have you ever gone silent for love? Ever given up something you loved, a song, a thing, a part of yourself, just to not disturb them? Comment, "I've been there," if you know that feeling. Because that was Selena's first step in losing herself. At first, the comments were tiny. "I just worry they won't understand you." "Could you tone it down? This meeting's with the school board." "It's just, the earrings are a bit distracting." Selena smiled. She took off the earrings, changed the dress, swapped the lipstick. Not because she wanted to, but because she thought, just for today, just this once. Then once became always. She entered parties with Eric like a carefully staged accessory, standing just far enough when he spoke to someone important, smiling just lightly enough when someone mentioned her old songs, and silent, always silent. One day, as she hummed softly in the car, Eric glanced over and said, "Could you not do that while driving? It's a little overwhelming." Just one line, soft, but enough to make her stop singing. Not just in the car, Selena didn't know. Some cages don't need locks, just someone to convince you you're too loud, and you'll walk in yourself. And from that moment, her voice wasn't a joy anymore. It was a burden. But she still didn't let go, not yet, because of a promise she believed was love. Only, that love demanded a terrible price. The offer came from New York, a 6-month tour across the East Coast's most iconic jazz theaters. It was the dream she'd had since 14, when she'd secretly listened to Ella Fitzgerald on a beat-up cassette player and swore one day she'd sing like that. Selena's hands shook as she opened the email. Her eyes sparkled. She hadn't thought herself sharp enough anymore to be chosen. But they remembered her. She pictured herself on a Brooklyn stage, golden light on her curls, the audience holding their breath at every note. She printed the invitation, folded it in half, left it on the table. Eric looked at it, read it, stayed silent. Then he said, 6 months? You'll go alone?" A pause. "Do you think our relationship can survive that kind of distance?" No yelling, no forbidding. Just one question, gentle enough to be innocent, heavy enough to make Selena feel guilty for her own dream. She folded the letter, tucked it away in a drawer, then turned to him and smiled. "It's okay. I'll wait for the next one." Next time. No one told her. Opportunities, like voices, if left in silence too long, may never return. And that one refusal was when Selena began to lower her voice, in her heart. A dream left abandoned on the side of the road, and her heart, still clapping for a man who she didn't know, was about to erase her from every song of her life. Turning down the tour was supposed to be temporary, but, like a musical phrase cut short, Selena didn't know how to reconnect the notes. She began turning down small weekend gigs at familiar bars, then community events. Eventually, she stepped away from the church choir, the very place her voice once made elders stand and applaud without their canes. At first, she gave excuses, tired, busy, focusing on family. But the truth was, she was afraid to sing, afraid Eric might disapprove, afraid someone might ask, "Aren't you going on tour?" Afraid that she might remember the feeling of standing on stage, being heard, being real. She slowly became a spectator in her own life, quietly brewing tea, prepping events, proofreading Eric's drafts. Sometimes he'd still say, "My friends adore you. You're so graceful." Selena nodded, smiled, and each time a piece of her voice drifted further away. One night, while doing dishes, she turned on the TV. A commercial aired. A woman's soaring, wild voice filled the room, a voice that sounded just like her, once. She stood still, eyes unblinking, hands numb in the cold water. For the first time she asked herself, if I stay silent long enough, will I one day forget I ever knew how to sing? The answer was creeping closer than she thought. Only, she kept pretending not to hear the deafening silence inside her, but that silence was screaming louder every day. As Selena shrank day by day, Eric Donovan grew on the stage of his own life. From university lecturer to beacon of justice, a white activist championing minority rights. He appeared on TV, podcasts, interviews with major magazines. Articles praised him as a white man who truly understands the pain of people of color, as if Selena's own experience was merely a bullet point in his PR file. And her? She stood backstage, fixing his collar before his talks, setting chairs, arranging snacks for his colleagues, taking photos as he smiled with journalists. No one asked, "Weren't you a singer?" No one knew. The silent black woman behind the camera once made a 300-seat hall hold its breath. One night, after a fundraiser, Selena's mother called. Her southern voice still rich, slow. "Are you still singing, Sel?" Selena glanced around the quiet living room, the laughter long gone. She swallowed hard. Sometimes. Silence. Then a sigh, long and heavy. Selena hung up. She sat down, looking at a framed photo on the table, her in a red dress, mic in hand, glowing. Next to her, Eric, polished and proud. And she realized, when had she become just the background of his dazzling story? When did the man who understood the pain of people of color become the one who made her ashamed of her own roots? When had she lost the right to speak? One day soon, Eric would cross a line. And this time, Selena wouldn't stay silent. Eric was invited as keynote speaker at a major racial equity conference. His fiery speech went viral, shared by hundreds of thousands. They called him one of the rare white men who truly listens. Selena sat in the third row among a sea of people listening to him speak about the quiet wounds that people of color endure. She smiled weakly, clapped on cue, but inside something was boiling, like a kettle sealed too tight. That night at the after-party, her mother called again. Eric frowned at the southern twang on the other end. After the call, he said, "You know, sometimes I think if you were a bit less southern, people would accept you more." Selena froze, not at the words, but at the calm in his eyes when he said them, as if it were just a neutral truth, a harmless suggestion, a revision to the draft of her life. Less of who I really am? She didn't say it aloud, but the question played in her head like a choked note caught in her throat. A few days later, she entered the room in her favorite purple dress and large crescent moon earrings. Eric raised a brow. "Feeling flashy today? Just not sure that fits this guest list." Selena removed the earrings, placed them in her bag, and in that moment, she knew. Each time she took something off to fit better into his world, she peeled away another layer of her voice. Then one day, she got into the car, humming without thinking. Eric didn't look up. "You're singing again?" 3 words, but like the final stone tossed into a cold, still lake. Selena fell silent, for good. She no longer sang, not at home, not in church, not even in dreams. And the most terrifying part, she didn't miss it, because when a woman forgets the sound of her own true voice, is she even herself anymore? But every silence has its edge, and for Selena, that edge was drawing closer by the day. One winter morning, no argument, no slammed doors, just absence. The closet, empty. The bookshelf, missing half. The keys, gone from the hook. And, on the kitchen table, a white envelope. Selena stood in the cold kitchen, weak sunlight cutting through the blinds, spotlighting the letter like a stage no one stepped onto. She opened it, read each line, mechanical like a contract termination. "I need time. I think we should take a short break. I've moved to a new place. The lease has been canceled. Wishing you all the best." No apology, no question, no tears. Just an erasure, as if he were checking off a to-do list. End Selena. Selena didn't scream, didn't break things. She simply sat down, hands on the table, staring into the space ahead like it might answer the only question that mattered. Why? She made coffee like a habit, washed a cup, swept the floor. Every move familiar, but her eyes as blank as a lake after a storm. Lifting the photo from his graduation day, her hands trembled. She wore a golden dress, beaming. He stood stiffly, his smile like cold stone. And then, without warning, tears shattered like glass on a tile floor. Not from pain, but from the realization that she had lived an entire love. Without noticing, she was disappearing. Selena once thought that if they ever broke up, she'd at least get to yell, to cry, to ask why. But no, she wasn't even given a role in her own goodbye. At that moment, she knew. There's a kind of pain deeper than betrayal. It's when someone leaves, without thinking you deserve a word. What she didn't know, that disappearance wasn't the end. It was the ellipsis before an earthquake. Because what he left behind wasn't emptiness. It was a woman about to scream back with a voice. He thought he had silenced. The days that followed passed like a melody without music. Morning, noon, night. Repeating like a ticking clock in a sealed room. No windows, no sound, no Selena. She didn't cry anymore. Not because she had healed, but because tears no longer had the power to release her. She had learned how to make coffee without looking at her hands, to walk past mirrors without flinching, because she no longer saw herself there. The apartment became a museum of things that once lived. The electric keyboard stood silent in the corner, draped in a thin sheet. Old photos were taken down, packed in boxes. She muted the TV anytime a commercial had background music. She avoided streets with bars she once performed in. She avoided people who asked, "When will you sing again?" Selena was once someone who could make a room rise to their feet with a single note. Now, she whispered even in her thoughts, afraid sound might make her collapse. One rainy evening, she stepped into the bathroom, turned on hot water, tried to relax. And, like a reflex from another life, she began to hum a verse from Amazing Grace. The first note came out, but it was off. The second, choked. The third, silence. Not because her voice was weak, but because every note now cut like a blade into the truth. She had lost the one thing that ever kept her alive. Selena slid down the bathroom wall, arms around her chest, tears blending into the hot water. No sobs, no screaming, just one sentence, looping like a curse in her mind. I let him take my voice, and I let it happen. A song can stop, but a voice buried alive does not stay silent forever. Only, sometimes, it must travel to the bottom of silence to rise again, and Selena was still sinking. But at that very depth, a fragile echo waited, hoping to be heard again. In days so dark that even light hesitated to knock, one person still showed up like nothing had changed. Monica Green. She didn't knock like a guest, didn't call ahead. She came in like a breeze through a jammed window, strong, warm, unapologetic. Grocery bag in hand, a silk scarf wrapped around her head. Cinnamon and orange peel followed her in. The apartment was cold and cluttered. No music, no lights, no breath of life. She didn't ask, "Are you okay?" She just looked at the pile of unwashed dishes, the mountain of laundry, and softly said, "I see." Selena said nothing, only lowered her head, shoulders trembling. Monica didn't hug her, didn't coddle. She set the groceries on the table, took off her coat, began tidying, opened the windows, pulled back the curtains. No advice, no lectures, no pity. After a while she said, "Sel, you don't have to sing, but don't disappear." It wasn't a suggestion. It was a declaration. Monica had once been Selena's jam session partner in college, had heard her sing when no one was watching, had seen her eyes light up after every show, and now she was the only one who remembered how radiant Selena once was when she sang. She placed a hand on her shoulder, squeezed gently. "I'm not letting you fade away that easily. Not while you still breathe. Not while there's still a voice inside you." Selena didn't respond, but for the first time in weeks, she let someone sit beside her. Just sit, in silence. But it was the kind of silence that didn't feel empty. Monica didn't know yet. That just days later, she would place a small opportunity in Selena's hands. A small thing, but one that would awaken the last echo still sleeping inside her chest. That week, Monica came back as usual. She brought sweet pastries, 2 iced coffees, and a look that knew more than it said. As they ate quietly, Monica set her cup down and said casually, "The Arts Center needs someone to teach a kid's vocal class. Just once a week. Basic stuff." Selena let out a small laugh, like someone laughing at a rumor from another planet. "You know I don't—" Monica cut her off. "Sing, no. But teach? Maybe." Selena looked down, her voice hoarse from disuse. "I don't even know what to teach anymore. I can't even sing in the shower, Monica." Monica didn't argue, didn't push. She just shrugged and pulled out a wrinkled flyer from her bag. Kids, aged 8 to 10. All they need is someone to show them how to breathe, how to keep rhythm. Not a diva, just someone who listens. Selena stayed silent. Her eyes caught on the italic line. Children's singing class. Begins with heart, not experience. She didn't say yes, but that night, lying in the dark, she saw something in her dream. A child stood in front of her and asked softly, "Miss, why don't you sing anymore?" That question pierced every wall she had built. No blame, no expectations, just an innocent question, the cruelest kind. She woke up, heart pounding, not from fear, but because. It had been so long since anything had reached inside her like that. Something inside her stirred. Lightly, faintly, but undeniably. Because sometimes all it takes is one child asking the right question. For a woman to remember she once had a voice worth answering with. Selena didn't call Monica. Didn't take the class. At least, not for a week. She moved around her apartment like someone waiting for a verdict with no trial. Ate in silence. Slept in broken fragments. She thought she had shut the world out, but on the 3rd night, the dream came back. A gray room, like an abandoned classroom. On the chalkboard, unfinished music notes. A child, no face, no name, stepped from the corner, placed a hand on her stomach and asked, "Miss, if your voice is gone, would you go find it again?" Selena woke up with her heart nearly bursting through her chest. It wasn't dawn yet, but inside her, a storm had begun. The dream repeated, night after night. Each time, the child came closer. Each time the question rang out, she felt herself shrink, like the little girl once shamed for singing too loud in class. Selena's silence began to grow restless. It was no longer acceptance. It was a shackle, a prison with no guard, only a door she feared to open. Then, on the 7th morning, Selena picked up the phone. Her hands trembled like she'd just touched the past. Her voice, raspy but firm. "One class. Just one, Monica." On the other end, there was no applause, no surprise, just a quiet breath, like thanks from someone who never doubted, because Monica knew. A true voice never dies. It only waits for someone brave enough to call it back. But Selena didn't know. The children weren't the only ones waiting in that room. Something else, stronger, deeper, a rising current from the fear she thought was long buried. The Art Center sat inside an old church, walls painted soft blue, doors cracked by time. Selena walked in holding a notebook like a shield. Her heart thudded like she was stepping onto the biggest stage of her life, yet not knowing how to sing. Inside the tiny classroom, 8 children sat in rows. Frizzy hair, brown skin, wide eyes, voices that chimed like glass bells. They didn't know she once had a voice that made grown adults cry. They only knew, "Miss Selena is going to teach us to sing today." Selena smiled, stiff, forced. She opened her mouth, trembling. "I don't sing much anymore, but I can help you start." A little girl raised her hand. Dimples, neatly braided hair. "Just one note, miss. Please?" Selena froze. Their eyes held no judgment, no curiosity, only the kind of waiting that believed something beautiful was about to happen. She took a deep breath, didn't sing, just counted beats, then softly started a simple scale. The kids repeated, messy, off-key, bursting like a flock of birds let loose. And in the middle of the chaos, Selena laughed, a real laugh, the first in months. She didn't know how long it would take to rebuild her voice, to trust it again, to sing a full song, but she had just found something more precious than her voice, a reason to begin. After class, when everyone had left, Selena stood before the old wooden piano in the corner. Her fingers touched the A minor key. A note rang out, then faded. She looked around. No one saw, no one heard. So she tried. A line of song. Slow, low, broken, but real. Selena stopped. Her heart beat hard, like it had just outrun a memory. She touched her lips. Breath heavy. Not from fear, but because a part of her old voice had just awakened under dust she thought would never lift. And she didn't yet know. In just a few weeks, that voice would rise, before the very people who once tried to bury it. One late afternoon, class ended early. The children rushed out like fledglings set free, leaving behind a room no longer cold, just quiet. Selena stayed. The curtains fluttered in the breeze. Sunlight streamed through the dusty windows, laying a golden veil over the old piano like silk. She walked toward it, gently, like she might shatter time, placed her hand on the lid, opened it. The ivory keys were worn, a few out of tune, but it was still a piano, still the same kind her mother had once used to teach her how to talk to sorrow without words. She laid her fingers on middle C. A sound emerged, shy, dry, but enough to awaken memories she thought had rotted away. Then a few chords. Her hands began to remember. Not perfect, not polished, but real, and in that moment tears fell, not from sadness, but because she had just reconnected with something she believed was gone forever, herself. Her hand reached shakily for the black notebook she had hidden in the bottom drawer. On the last page, an unfinished melody, scribbled in smudged ink. They clipped my wings and called it love. They silenced me and named it peace. She read those lines over and over, as if they were the key to the room where she had locked herself away for 3 years. Selena closed her eyes, and, for the first time, she didn't sing for anyone. Not to be heard, not to be loved, but to say to the buried part inside her, "I'm still here." Her voice was hoarse, her breath broken, but every note carried blood, pain, and a vow that could not be erased. She didn't know that this shattered song would become the only weapon she'd carry when facing the two people who once muted her, in the middle of life's grandest celebration. That night, Selena sat alone at the small kitchen table. No lights, just the amber glow of an old desk lamp. Beside her, the keyboard, once hidden under cloth for over a year. In front of her, the black notebook, open. A pen, dried out from disuse, waited like a held breath. She wasn't inspired. She didn't want to perform. But some things, if not written, will suffocate you in silence. She began with the phrase that wouldn't leave her head. "I gave you silence, and you called it peace." Her hand trembled as she wrote. Not from fear, but because when pain is finally named, the body can barely contain it. She scratched, rewrote, tore pages, but this time, she didn't quit. Each bar of music surfaced not from logic, but from her pulse. An imperfect song, but true. Not for studios, not for praise, just a confession to herself. You called me wild, and I believed you. You called me too much, and I shrank. She wrote using the very words Eric had once said. But this time, they weren't shackles. They were evidence. The song had no title, but its message was painfully clear. Silence is not love, and a voice does not need to apologize for existing. She wrote until her hands ached, her heart squeezed tight, but her eyes gleamed like someone had pulled open curtains in a room long left in darkness. Before closing the book, she read the final line aloud. I don't sing to be heard. I sing because I am. And at that moment, Selena understood. She was no longer the one who had been left behind, silenced, erased. She was the survivor, the keeper of fire, the one rewriting her own song. She didn't know. This unnamed, unpolished, unperformed song would be the one that silenced an entire wedding room in just a few weeks. Saturday morning. The sky clear as if it had never known storms. Selena was wiping the kitchen counter when the knock came. Not rushed, not urgent, just 3 steady taps. She opened the door. A man in a gray suit smiled politely. For Miss Selena Carter, a wedding invitation from Mr. Eric Donovan and Miss Jessica Monroe. She froze, not because of the names, but the handwriting. On the envelope, Eric's own hand, neat, cold, steady. She opened it with a letter opener, like cutting open a wound that never truly closed. Thick ivory card, embossed print. The first line stabbed her chest. We warmly invite you to our wedding, where we celebrate the beautiful things we once shared. She laughed. Dry, bitter. Celebrate the beautiful things we once shared. Was he referring to the years she was silenced? The moments she gave up her life to become a background in his spotlight? Inside, one final line. It would be wonderful if you performed a song. You used to be the one everyone listened to in silence. We look forward to hearing you again. Every cell in Selena ignited, not from emotion, but from the sting of a slap wrapped in velvet. He wanted her to stand there, among his friends, beside his new bride, and sing? Not to honor her, but to close the final act of a woman he had erased. Selena gripped the invitation until it crumpled in her hand. Her heart pounded like war drums. Not from pain, but from a silent rage rising into music, the first note of a song no one had heard before. And in her mind, she whispered, You want me to sing? Fine. But this time, I'll sing with the pain you gave me. Selena didn't know that everyone at that wedding, the ones laughing, the ones whispering, Eric, Jessica, none of them expected the voice they were about to hear would be a reckoning. Selena stared at the invitation all night, not out of nostalgia, but because every line echoed years of mockery, sweetened suggestions, and moments when he looked at her like furniture that no longer matched the decor. She remembered the first time she sang for him, the way his gaze seemed in awe. Now she knew it wasn't awe at her gift, it was satisfaction that she sang the way he wanted to hear. And now he wanted that voice again, not to cherish it, but to display it, like a relic, proof she was fine. Look, she's singing at my wedding. Selena didn't cry. She stood, opened her closet, took out the black dress her mother had sewn, for important days when you don't need to stand out to stand strong. She placed her hand on the fabric, breathed deep, then turned to the desk, opened the black notebook to its last page. The song was still incomplete, but it didn't need ornate chords, just truth, raw and real. In the days that followed, Selena practiced, alone, no stage, no lights, just an old apartment, broken notes, and buried memories turned into music. She wasn't rehearsing to perform. She was preparing to reclaim, because this time she wouldn't sing to please. She would sing so they couldn't look away. The night before the wedding, Selena sat down and wrote the title at the top of the page. I Sang Myself Back. She capped her pen, closed the book, and looked into the mirror. For the first time in years, the reflection wasn't a shadow, but she didn't yet know. that this return wouldn't just shake Eric. It would force Jessica, the woman who thought she had won, to confront a truth neither of them had dared to speak. Wedding day. Guests laughing. White gowns gleaming. Golden lights coating champagne glasses like butter on memory. Selena, dressed in pure black, elegant, composed. No lipstick, no earrings. Only eyes sharpened like blades honed over 3 years. People stared. Some nodded awkward greetings. Others whispered. She was the ex. Now, the mysterious guest everyone whispered about. Why did she come? Why agree to sing? Are they still friends? Eric approached. Still that polished smile. Jessica beside him. Red lips, eyes like cut glass. Selena, thank you for coming and for singing. It really means a lot. Selena looked at him. Didn't smile, didn't nod, just placed her hand on the sheet music in her purse. Thank you for the invitation. I'll sing, just like you asked. Jessica blinked, uneasy. Eric squeezed her hand like a cue. It's okay. But how could it be okay? The woman they thought they had forgiven was stepping onto this stage not to bless them but to take back what was stolen. The reception warmed up. Music played softly. Then the mic was passed to her. Selena stepped onto the small platform. No spotlight, but every eye locked on her. She stood tall, didn't bow, didn't thank anyone. She looked straight at Eric, at Jessica, at all the people who thought a voice could be buried in polite silence. She raised the mic, and in that instant, the room fell still. Selena opened the sheet. No backing track, no band, just her voice, the one they thought was gone, now returned. Like a declaration made of flesh and fire, have you ever looked someone in the eye, the person who once silenced you and chosen to speak, in a way they cannot interrupt? If you have, comment, I raised my voice. Because Selena's song was about to make that entire wedding room run out of lies. No more pretending, just truth, raw and irreversible. Selena took a deep breath, and then her voice rang out, not soft, not soaring, but low, heavy, raw, each note dragged from the depths of her chest, every word a blade, every melody a cut, reopening the memories he had so carefully covered. I gave you silence, and you wore it like a crown. I gave you light, and you dimmed it down. The room froze. Glasses suspended mid-air. Blinking slowed, afraid to miss a line that might crack them open. Eric stood stiff. Jessica turned away, but all saw her hand curl into a fist. The song went on. No music, no harmony. Because truth doesn't need adornment. It only needs to be spoken. You told the world you saved me, but I was whole before you came. That line, like a bullet to the hearts of those who once hailed him as the white man who understands black pain. Selena didn't cry, because she wasn't singing out of pain. She was singing from rebirth. Each lyric stripped everything bare. You clipped my wings and said it's love. You hushed my fire and called it peace. And slowly, they began to understand. This wasn't a performance. This was testimony, a verdict, an earthquake written in the blood of a woman who once chose silence for peace, and nearly got buried by it. The final line fell like a gavel. I sing myself back from where you buried me. Selena lowered the mic. No bow, no applause, just a silence long enough for a soul to turn a new page. Eric tried to smile. He couldn't. Jessica stepped back, a question visible in her eyes. What did you do to that woman before you met me? Selena walked down, slow, steady, like someone stepping away from a house she just set on fire. But the event wasn't over, because someone else was no longer able to sit still, someone who thought she had won. But now, she had to ask herself whether she ever really knew love. Jessica stood frozen, not from jealousy, not from rage, but because, For the first time, she realized she had never truly known the man beside her. Since meeting Eric, he had always been perfect, calm, thoughtful, polished, supportive of women of color, a champion of social justice. He spoke of Selena with a soft smile, saying, "She's very artistic, but too sensitive." Jessica believed him, because he had painted that portrait himself, in the tone of someone who had tried to love but wasn't understood. But that song wasn't written by someone too sensitive. It was sung by someone who had been caged in polite cruelty and clawed her way out with blood and breath. Jessica looked at Eric. He downed a glass of champagne like it might erase memory, but his face was pale, and in his eyes, for the first time, was fear. She looked at the guests. No one spoke, but something had broken in their gaze. Not Selena, not the ex, but the glow of a man who had been propped up on the silence of someone else. Jessica stepped outside, tossing her veil back like shedding a borrowed image. Selena stood in the hallway, dim lights casting a halo over her black hair. They locked eyes. Jessica's voice had lost its edge. "I didn't know. He never said." Selena smiled. Not bitter, not mocking, just the silence of someone who no longer needed revenge, because truth had done it for her. "He didn't need to," she whispered. "I lived it." Jessica stepped back, not from fear, but because, in Selena's eyes, she saw herself. In the future, if she didn't wake up in time, this was no longer a story of three, it was between two women. One who walked out of lies with a song, and one standing at the threshold of awakening. Jessica was about to ask the question Selena had never dared say aloud, a question that would tear everything open. But the answer wouldn't come from Eric. It would come from her own heart. Jessica stood still, her white dress trailing like a shadow being shortened. She looked at Selena, the woman she had pushed into the background for 2 years, a footnote in her own love story, a lesson learned by Eric. But now, Selena wasn't the past. She was a mirror, cracked, but reflecting every truth. Jessica asked slowly, her voice low but heavy, "Did he ever tell you that you were too much? That you needed to soften, to be loved better?" Selena paused, then nodded. "Many times, but not as many times as he praised you, for knowing how to listen." Jessica shuddered, not at Selena, but at herself, because she'd heard that line too. "You're not like Selena. You don't overreact. You know how to keep the peace." Peace? Now she understood. Eric's definition of peace was silence, shrinking, giving up identity bit by bit to become the ideal woman. Jessica took off the pearl earrings he once gave her. They dropped to the floor like a sudden awakening. "Did you ever feel that loving him meant going against yourself?" Selena looked at her, softer than ever. "Not feel. No, but I knew too late." No distance remained between them, no competition, just two women. Both taught that love meant being less, and now, standing in front of each other, becoming more. Jessica turned to the reception hall, where Eric still laughed with a guest, as if the song had been just an artistic moment, as if he was still the center of a story no one had rewritten. But then, Jessica spoke, quiet, certain, like a blade unsheathed. "Today is no longer a wedding." Selena didn't ask why, because she knew, when a woman dares ask the right question, she's already rewriting the script of her life. Jessica walked back into the hall, no longer a bride, but a woman who had just pulled the needle from a wound that never healed. Eric saw her. Relief washed over his face. He reached out. "Where were you? Everyone is—" Jessica raised her hand, a silent gesture that stopped the room. The laughter died. No one knew what was happening, but everyone felt something had changed. Jessica stepped up to the stage, slowly, eyes not searching for cameras or guests, only for one person. Selena. When she saw her standing quietly in the corner, Jessica smiled. Not the smile of someone who had won, but of someone who had stopped losing. She took the mic. Her voice cut through the stillness like the hum of the ceiling lights above. "Thank you, Selena. For singing the truth I should have realized before I put on this dress." All eyes turned to Selena, but she didn't nod, didn't bow, just looked at Jessica with empathy and a warning. "Don't go back." Jessica turned to Eric. "You wanted a woman who listens? You wanted softness, silence. But did you ever think, maybe you didn't want a wife? You just wanted a mirror that didn't reflect anything that contradicted you?" Eric frowned, took her hand. "What are you saying? This is our wedding. We love each other." Jessica pulled her hand away, slow, deliberate, like untying the last thread of a staged performance. "No. You loved me when I didn't question, when I didn't push back, but I started loving myself again the moment I heard the voice of the woman you once said was too much." The room fell dead quiet. Servers froze. The DJ missed his cue. Jessica took off her ring, placed it on the mic stand, a final statement that needed no applause. Eric stepped back. For the first time, he looked small, not because he was left behind, but because no one wanted to be cast in his script anymore. Selena left the room first. Jessica was the second. And the wedding hall, once a stage for performance, was now just a space filled with an audience. And a silence no blessing could fill. But the story wasn't over, because the next day, a video would go viral. And this time, Selena wouldn't need anyone to take her voice down, because it was hers, and the world would have no choice but to listen. Just one day after the wedding collapsed, the video was uploaded. No one knew who filmed it. Just a shaky hand, angled from the third row. The mic echoed imperfectly, but that voice, it found every crack in the human heart. No flashy title, just 7 plain words, typed in lowercase. She sang the truth at his wedding, and that was enough. 12 hours later, 200,000 shares, 1 million views. The Black Voices community reposted it with the caption, "Not a song, a testimony, and a resurrection." The comments poured in like a floodgate burst. "I don't know who she is, but I was her. If someone ever said you're too much, send them this. This voice saved me from a marriage I hadn't dared to leave." Selena sat before the screen. She didn't smile, didn't cry. She simply placed her hand on her chest, where her voice had once been buried, and felt it breathing again. Monica called. "Told you. You don't need a stage, you just need to tell the truth." An indie record label DM'd, "We don't need a diva. We need a voice with blood, with story. We think that's you." Selena didn't rush to reply, because to her, the most important thing had already happened. Not the offer, not the virality, but the truth was no longer buried beneath polite lies. Eric? Silent. Jessica? Created a new account. No posts, except one story. A photo of Selena on that small stage, eyes forward, voice rising. Captioned, "Thank you for daring to sing. I'm learning not to fear my own voice." Selena turned off her phone. She stood up, walked to the piano, and this time no note needed to apologize for existing. What she didn't know was that a former fan, now a renowned documentary filmmaker, had seen the clip and was drafting an email. "I want to tell your story, not about music, but about return, from silence." This would be the biggest stage of her life, not for fame, but so no one would ever again believe that a woman must shrink to fit into love. 3 weeks after the viral video, a gentle autumn morning, a brown envelope was slipped beneath Selena's door. No name, no return address. She opened it slowly, the handwriting familiar. Corners slightly curled just like Eric's whenever he wrote under pressure. The letter was long, but it offered no excuses. No "but", no "because", no "you did too". Only a confession, late, and raw. I used to think keeping you quiet was love. I thought silence meant peace. I believed if you shrank, you'd stay. I never realized your voice wasn't an accessory. It was your survival. And I smothered it, with gentle hugs, with compliments I carefully controlled. I'm sorry. Not for what you lost, but for the fact it took me 3 years to see you stand tall and realize I never truly loved you, because I never let you be you. Selena read to the final line. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just want you to know, the first time I truly heard you sing wasn't with my ears. It was with regret. She laid the letter down. No trembling, no tears. Because for her, that apology wasn't a key. It was a period. No comma, no continuation. In that moment, Selena felt something she hadn't believed she'd ever touch again. Peace. Not because Eric had admitted fault, but because she no longer needed his admission to know the value of her voice. That afternoon, Selena sat at the piano. Not to continue an old song, but to begin a new one, a prelude. Not written in pain, but in freedom. And as she played the first chords, a sentence echoed inside her like late autumn sun. I don't need applause to know I sang right. But that night, something unexpected happened. A phone call from a stranger, a 17-year-old girl from a small town, just escaped an abusive relationship. Her voice trembled through the receiver. I heard you sing, and I thought, maybe I can survive too. Selena was quiet, then said, You won't just survive, you'll rewrite the story. Because from now on, Selena's story was no longer in the past. It was an invitation to everyone who was ever told, be smaller to be loved. The following month, Selena was in New York, not to perform, not to accept awards, but to take a seat among hundreds of women in a warmly lit auditorium, at a summit titled Voices Uncaged. She wasn't the headliner. She was the ignition. On the big screen, the wedding clip played again, before activists, lawmakers, and young girls stepping onto a stage for the first time without fear of being interrupted. Each time, Selena thought she had finished her part. Someone else stood up and said, Your story was the overture to my own. You sang, so I'd know. I'm not crazy, I'm just alive. Because of you, I stopped apologizing for speaking. Selena sat quietly. No mic in hand, no stage dress, just soft eyes, slightly wet, because she knew. Her voice wasn't a sound anymore. It was proof. It was a key. It was the signal that told others, it's safe to open your mouth now. Then, a moment no one expected. A 10-year-old girl was invited to the stage. She was one of Selena's first students. From that tiny class long ago. She said nothing at first, just unfolded a small paper, hands trembling, and read her very first poem. My teacher sings with her heart. I write with my hand. But we say the same thing. Girls have the right to speak loud, without fear of being left behind. The entire room stood. No chants, just thunderous applause. Long, layered, resonant, like a chorus. Selena didn't walk to the stage. She didn't need to, because at last, she had done the one thing no one ever taught her to do, lead without standing in front. As the stage lights dimmed, someone leaned in and asked, Do you still sing? Selena smiled, soft, certain. I never stopped. I just changed the stage. Now, I sing through others' survival. Just then, outside the auditorium, a new email arrived. Selena, we're curating this year's TED Talk on breaking politeness and daring to speak. We can't imagine anyone more fitting than you. Selena glanced at the screen, not to reply immediately, because this time, she didn't need to chase a calling. She was the calling. Selena's story didn't end with applause. No grand stage, no golden mic, no spotlight glitter. It ended and began again, in the moment she dared to sing from the wound she once tried to hide. She stood up, not to prove anything, but to reclaim her voice and to pass it on to every woman ever told that silence is wisdom. Selena wasn't a superhero. she was one of many. A woman who once loved, once hurt, once questioned her own worth, just like the millions of women now watching this video. And her story was a reminder. Your voice doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be yours. Because when you dare to speak, you don't just save yourself. You carve a path for an entire generation to follow, knowing they never had to shrink to be loved. If Selena's story moved you, if you've ever been told you were too much, too emotional, too strong, share this video with the women you love, with the women you admire, and with the men who still need to learn that listening is stronger than silencing, like if you resonate. Subscribe to help us spread real stories that truly touch. Because every time you hit share, you help return a voice to someone who was once told to stay silent. Thank you for listening all the way to the end. And remember, your story is worth telling too.